Are you ready for a war?
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Xaereth Prevails, a Grand Arena story. This is the 9th episode in the current Grand Arena Championships, which means that it's the final match in our group, and it also means that it's the finals, because I've won the last 2 matches, and both of those matches were pretty difficult for their own reasons. I'll let you guys watch those episodes if you like, but I've been able to overcome some adversity and get here to face a guy who spelled judgment wrong, which actually I don't think it's spelled wrong. I think that my opponent is French, and so they spelled it in the French manner. So this match was going to be difficult for a lot of different reasons. Fortunately, my opponent did not have a 7-star General Skywalker, so that was good. But if you look at the top there, my opponent has 500k more GP than me, and that's 300 more in characters themselves. They had a pretty similar amount of relics, actually. There wasn't a huge advantage either direction. We had the same number of Zetas, and I actually had more Gear 13, but the huge difference was my opponent had an extra 55 pieces of Gear 12, or characters at Gear 12. That's a lot. That's really difficult to overcome just because they have so many well-geared characters at their disposal. That, combined with the fact that my opponent had some really good mods as well, they had better speed mods than I did for sure, meant that this match was going to be pretty difficult. Looking at my opponent's win record and all of that, it looks like my opponent had not gotten a lot of undersized wins. Coming into this, they hadn't gotten a huge number of banners, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. Like, they might have just skipped around or, had to miss it because they were on vacation or something like that. And the fact that we're in the finals means that they already beat 2 really strong opponents, and I was not going to underestimate them.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Moving into the round itself, my opponent had a lot of different teams up front. Well, actually just 4, because that's all that you're allowed to do. But there wasn't like a consistent theme. There wasn't like all weak teams or all teams that were going to be countered by Traya or something like that. There's General Grievous, which his strength is pretty obvious. The clone team with Rex lead and Barriss is also very solid, with Shock T there with their Zeta. That zone was really going to be really tough. And then we have the Bossk team with Watt, which I hadn't faced before, but looks really tough. And then a Carth team with nothing other than like some random Zeta on Juhani, which I really wasn't that worried about. The Juhani Zeta, it looks more interesting than it actually is. But I decided to tackle the hard zone first because I already had kind of pre-established counters to be able to beat this team. And it's actually really nice to have a pre-established counter in the opening phases, like being able to clear a zone with teams that you already knew you were going to be using to be able to counter your opponent's teams is really nice. It's basically like getting some free information. I a lot of times to myself refer to the first phase of attacks as the uncertainty phase, because you don't really know what you're going to be running into in the back zones, and so you want to be able to keep some of those stronger teams that you have available to be able to counter those. And so when you can use one of those stronger teams to be able to take out the first zone, and you don't actually have to like be concerned that you're burning a team that's too strong or something, it's really nice, because then you find out what's in your opponent's back zone, and you're also just being able to use teams that you were certainly going to be able to use in the first place. So in this match itself, I've shown this match to you guys a lot of times, but the first thing you want to do, you want to make sure you take out B2 first. You want to mark him and take him out, and then if you can, you want to just like hang out for a while and not kill anyone, because if you do end up killing someone, then Grievous will get another turn. And so your goal here after you take out B2 is to just wait and be patient. So you see I got the stun off on Magna Guard, and that's great because he's not taunting anymore, and now I can use all of my attacks on either Droidica or B1. And you're just waiting right now. We're just kind of in the wait phase. You want to wait until Jedi Knight Revan has his mark again, and then eventually we're going to target Grievous himself. One thing that I do a lot of times when I'm attacking General Grievous, fighting his team at least, is I try to take down his turn meter with Grandmaster Yoda when it starts getting high, and I think I kind of miscalculated in this case because I hit General Grievous when his turn meter was already kind of low, and it not only failed to reduce much turn meter, but it also forced a taunt on Droidica. And, I don't mind hitting Droidica because it's an annoying piece of something, but it's also, you don't want to have to be limited to just one thing to attack. Like, you want to be able to spread out your hits. And luckily in this case, it didn't end up really hurting me that much. This Grievous squad, Grievous went down pretty quick and easy, actually. I was surprised. Usually at this level, my opponents have really strong General Grievouses. I tend to be the only exception to the rule, which my Grievous up till now has only been Relic 1, which is something that I am absolutely going to be addressing shortly. But once Grievous goes down, the rest of the team is pretty easy. Droidica definitely still has some teeth, so you want to watch out for him. You want to take him out as quick as you can, or if you can stun him with Bastila, do something like that. That's really going to help. But 59 banners against General Grievous is great. That's a pretty efficient win. Anything above 55 is pretty good against General Grievous. Though at this point, unless there's something special with General Grievous, something weird like BB-8 or Watt or something, that I've really been getting 57 or higher. Honestly, that's kind of what I've been expecting. My next match was going to be against clones, and I knew that my Commander Luke team was going to do me well here. They do counter clones extraordinarily well if you have C-3PO on the team. If you don't have 3PO, it can get pretty dicey. I know that a lot of my opponents in the past have told me that my Commander Luke team, or their Commander Luke team, ended up losing to my clones. And the common denominator there is that they never used 3PO with Commander Luke. 3PO is really helpful because he provides an expose every time you do a basic, and you're doing a lot of basics. Han is he's double tapping on his basic, and Chewie is assisting every time. And, obviously every time you attack with other things, you're doing basic attacks as well. And so you really want to make sure that you have 3PO here if you want to have a surefire counter for clones. And even so, it starts getting a little dicey anyways. Like, the clones aren't easy to take out necessarily, especially not with Barriss sitting there being annoying. I've also seen variants with R2-D2 on defense, which is also frustrating because you can't target everyone because they're in stealth. And if you can't use the Chewbacca dispel, then you could be in trouble in some cases. But at any rate, I did get 56 banners. That's an acceptable amount. I was hoping for higher. In the back zone, there was some pretty interesting things. My opponent had a Darth Revan team without Badstila in the back, and then Qi'ra with Nest is pretty standard, but I did have to use my Darth Revan team, or I was going to have to plan to use my Darth Revan team to be able to counter my opponent there. Okay, so at this point, I knew that I needed to kind of take stock of which teams I was going to use against what. And the problematic part was I knew that I was going to need to keep at least 3 meta teams available to be able to beat the teams in the back zone. Just because I knew that I'd need Darth Revan to be able to counter my opponent's Darth Revan. And then I assumed that my opponent would have Nightsisters in the back as well as Geonosians in the back. And so I wanted to keep Padme and Traya available for those. And so I needed to figure out which teams I was going to be able to counter Bossk with, and Carth, Old Republic, and also Qi'ra with Nest. Now, Qi'ra with Nest was a little bit easier for me in terms of trying to decide who I was going to take them out with, because I have a great record with First Order against that, and there wasn't really anything too crazy about that squad. I mean, everything was really well modded. My opponent had excellent mods throughout. But my First Order team does a really good job of just taking out Nest teams whenever they want, basically. It's a relatively easy match, so that's what I wanted to do there. The biggest question was how I could take out the Bossk bounty hunters with Wat, because Wat would take his bonus turn, he'd give Bossk a taunt that I couldn't dispel at all, and then Bossk would be like impossible to kill because he'd be regenerating his protection all the time, and he'd be just doing all of his Bossk things. Like it's just a really tough team to be able to take out, and I didn't really have any teams left available to be able to kind of bypass that taunt. You know, like if I commanded Luke, I could, in at least some circumstances, be able to take out members of the teams without actually needing to hit Bossk, and I didn't really have that available. So my options were Jedi Training Rey, which I have kind of bad flashbacks with her, and Zam is on that team, and Zam absolutely demolished my Jedi Training Rey team at one point with thermal detonators, and even though I ended up winning, like a few of my characters just outright died. It was not a good, efficient win. So I eventually decided on a kind of foolish plan, and I wanted to use Imperial troopers against Bossk. So let's see how it goes. Now, the entire premise of my plan was to be able to win against Bossk using my AoEs. And that was basically it, because I knew I needed Thrawn to be able to go with Traya, just in case I ran into like a Padme team in the back zone. You know, my Padme counter is Thrawn with Traya, or Traya with Thrawn rather. And so I figured I could probably focus Bossk all the way down by the time I had all these turns, but as it turned out, like, Bossk just regenerated all of his protection right away, and I was ability blocked and stunned, and there were issues being had everywhere, and this was not an ideal situation for me, obviously. And I almost just like hung it up and decided to quit before I gave turn meter, and then I realized, you know what, I still actually have a lot of health going on. I have some okay things going on. Let's just see how it plays out. And so, you know, I just took a bunch of turns, and eventually Snowtrooper with Relic 4 was able to get one kill, and that's all you need, because then you can put Death Mark on Bossk. Bossk evaporated, and then even though Veers is dead and I really need to make him a little more survivable, I was in command of the situation again. It wasn't ideal by any stretch, and I wasn't even able to regenerate all of my protection, but 55 banners for the potential fiasco that was at hand is great. And I don't know if I learned anything from that other than probably need to use Thrawn if you're going to be trying to take out someone like Bossk. Like, he is just too resilient to be able to take out even with troopers that have a lot of offense going for them. Jedi Training Rey here is, on the other hand, a really great counter for a lot of different teams. I don't know how she would have done against Bossk, just because maybe I would have been able to take him out with all my expose damage and everything, but in the end, I'm content with how I managed the attack with the Imperial troopers, and now we're going to try to finesse against this team. Like, this Old Republic team can really do a lot of damage if you're not careful. And so you want to make sure that you have a lot of different things in place. You want to make sure that you're stunning people. You want to make sure that you're dazing mission as much as you can. You need to be able to dispel on Zalbar and Juhani and just kind of stun all the time. Also, if you have R2 in here, you want to stealth BB-8, because BB-8's not making attacks, and so no one's going to be like countering against BB-8, and he has foresight, and so not only is he going to dodge the first shot against him, but he's also going to heal himself and R2 in the process, both the protection and health. And that's only from the Zeta if you have that, but it's kind of a nice option. And otherwise, you want to just try to control the situation as best you can with stuns and the liberal application of exposed damage. And in the end, I mean, trying to get stuns off are great, and once you're able to do that, then the match gets a lot easier. Now you'll see that I kind of swerved over to Zalbar to start doing damage instead of knocking down missions health pool more, and that's just because the second I take that protection down to below 0, or to equal to 0, I guess, Zalbar immediately taunts and has retribution up, and you want to avoid that as long as mission is around. And so I just started hitting Zalbar for a while until I actually had an attack available that would actually take mission out in one hit, which ended up working out pretty well here. And now all I'm trying to do is just regenerate all of my hit points, all of my protection, and which I was able to do with Finn's special and BB-8's Illuminated Destiny. That was a nice timed ability availability. But in my opponent's back zone, I was absolutely right that they had Nightsisters, but their Nute squad was really confusing, and actually so was the Mother Talzin squad. Luckily for me, I did not have to deal with those yet, and I did have meta teams available, so I knew I was going to be able to get a full clear, but I needed to try to get as efficient a full clear as possible. I'd already been dropping a lot of banners here and there, and this was one of my least efficient starts, honestly. I mean, I know that maybe that sounds disingenuous, but the truth is I generally am able to get close to full points against my opponent's front row, regardless of what teams they have. And it's whatever is in the back that's kind of the uncertain part, because that's where a lot of the meta teams end up being. But as it stands, I had dropped quite a few points already, and I really needed to maximize my points. So this was a really interesting match because my opponent had not put Bastila into their group. I assume that they used Badstila with their Emperor Palpatine team, which is totally fine. But also their Darth Revan was significantly faster than my own Darth Revan. However, my Badstila barely outsped their Malak, which their Malak was incredibly fast as well. And so I was able to get a lot of debuffs on everyone. I did need to take Sith Trooper here instead of HK, just because if Darth Revan was able to go and hit my own Darth Revan with fear, the entire team would be feared and I would just lose the match right away. And so I needed to use Sith Trooper, even though I usually like to use Sith Trooper with Traya. This was a necessary thing that I had to do. Like I had to be able to counter their team with a pre-taunt, and the fact that Malak just had a big FU hit on my Sith Trooper as he departed this world was really frustrating. But 56 banners is still fine. I mean, that was probably going to be the hardest match and the most uncertain match that I had this entire time, and just dropping a few banners is not a big deal against that. However, it contributed to the narrative of me dropping banners. Like 4 banners every time is disastrous. Honestly, like if you drop 4 banners every time, that's dropping 32 total. That getting a 56 sounds like it's good, but it's really not. Like you need to have a lot of plus 60 banner wins. Moving on to the next match, my opponent did not really put very much tenacity or speed on Nest, and that led to me trying an early stun with old original Kylo on Nest just to try to get her out of being able to do anything. But of course I missed. My opponent had loaded Nest with a lot of health, actually. Like I think that she's at like 60k health or something, and that's at gear 12, so quite a bit, but definitely not insurmountable. So as I've talked about at length before, I've done this match a lot if you guys have been watching, but for those of you who haven't, you want to take out Vander Chewbacca first. That's the very first one that you want to target. And the reason for that is that he can passively revive Scoundrels that get defeated, and you don't want that. Obviously, you go through all this trouble trying to take out Nest or L3, and L3 or Vander just immediately revives them and resets his prepared ability, and that's that. So the next thing you want to do here is take out L3. In this case, well, Qi'ra was an obvious one because she has such low hit points, but you can't really mess with Nest at all until you've taken out L3, and that's because if you stun L3, or if you stun Nest, as you probably saw previously, once you stun Nest, it's fine. You can stun her, and it's great, but then the second you hit L3 passively just dispels all debuffs on one random character, and that could be Nest, which if she's stunned, you don't want her to become unstunned because you've hit L3, and so you essentially just have to ignore Nest until you've taken out L3. And in this case, it's kind of a strange thing having Dengar. He's just stealthed, and the second he comes out of stealth, we hit him, and he gets crit, and he goes back into stealth. And so it's kind of an annoying factor because he can throw his thermal detonators and kind of derail our ability to get max banners, and that's just what he did there. Luckily, I resisted a lot of thermals there, but that can really kind of mess with your day if you get hit by a lot of thermals. At any rate, this strategy is pretty much the same with or without Dengar there live. Once you have Nest stunned, then you're able to kind of control the situation by just hitting her over and over again, and she has tenacity down because Kylo Ren Unmasked has tenacity down on one of his attacks, and you have a 2-turn stun that he uses that's not resistible. And so you gain a little bit of control of the situation just because Nest is not able to move at all, and you have a couple characters that can reduce her turn meter, and because of all of her bonus protection, you don't have to kill her right away. And so that means that if she's the last one remaining, or in this case the second to last remaining, you can control her turn meter and kind of regenerate your protection and health until you need to take her out. And so here I did have full health and protection for the most part, and I just decided to take this out. My opponent had taken a little bit of my First Order officer's protection bar out, but at the same time, Dengar was running out of hit points, and so I did my best to be able to get First Order officer the buff that he needed to be able to regenerate that last 5%, which he ended up getting at the last minute, and I got a full 60 banners against a team that can be really tricky to beat, but First Order is just so good at taking out Qi'ra teams. I'd be curious to know how high level Qi'ra team my First Order at Gear 12 could beat, actually. It just seems like I'm so advantaged. I assume that at some relic level that's going to be problematic, though. So for the remaining zone, I had a couple kind of strange teams to counter. There was a really strange kind of hybrid Nightsisters team with Baze, of all people, and there was a Nute team with a bunch of Separatists, but then also Asajj, who is a Separatist, of course, and Zombie. And that was a really kind of problematic squad. I didn't really know what to do with it, and so I decided Traya's been actually kind of having a hard time lately countering some of these newfangled teams, and I decided that I would just take Traya against the kind of easier team as I saw it, and I wanted to get an undersized win here if I could, and I didn't really foresee there being any issues, any difficulties. This Nightsister's team is really fast though, and they're just kind of running circles around me at this point, and so I'm trying to figure out what characters I should put what things on, and I actually think that I should have put the Isolate debuff on Mother Talzin just so that she wouldn't be gaining so much turn meter as bonuses, but as it stands, it's still fine to put it on Daka just because she also gains a lot of bonus turn meter when certain things happen, and my goal here was just to get Annihilate up and be able to take out Old Daka right away. And so Old Daka was gone, and the thing I kind of forgot about was that Mother Talzin's leadership revives characters and they get a lot of hits in. And so I kind of regretted taking out Spirit so fast because Spirit was hitting me really hard over and over again. Like this was actually a really interesting squad. Like I don't know what other squads would counter it really efficiently. Maybe, I mean, I think Padme would do just fine. There's a number of teams that would beat this, but I don't know what teams you'd get a full 60 banners with. Traya definitely would not get the full 60 banners against it, obviously, but I had assumed that everyone was going to survive, and that was obviously an incorrect assumption. And so I was able to get a second Annihilate off and be able to take out Talzin. And so now all we have is a hidden acolyte, and I have to chew through Baze's different levels of protection and health before I could even hit acolyte. And so acolyte is just going over and over again. She's getting a ton of turns, and every time she gets a turn, then Spirit pops up and does some more damage. And it was kind of, it's a really interesting squad. I am genuinely considering maybe trying to run something like this in the next season. So watch out for that. I don't really know what's going to happen with it, but it's something I really want to consider. 53 banners there is awful, by the way. It was truly awful, especially for an undersized win. 2 of my characters got taken out. The other 2 did not have their full protection. Like it was just not good. That's not what I wanted. -7 banners to my total put me at under 1900 total, assuming I could get max banners against this squad, which it looked like maybe I could, but there's a lot of really kind of tricky mechanics here at play. So we have Zombie, who is just, you know, she has the pre-taunt, and so you have to take that out. And then as long as Asajj stays alive, Zombie stays alive. But you don't necessarily want to take Asajj out right away, because you want to take out Dooku first, or you want to take out Nute first. There's a lot of target saturation here, and my opponent's team actually it wasn't even as good as it could have been. It didn't have the Nute Zeta, for instance. And so I don't know, kudos to my opponent. This team was really interesting, and it did a lot of damage, a lot more damage than I kind of gave it credit for. I was able to take out Dooku right away, and you know, Dooku was really not going to be a problem anyways, probably, just because of all of his out of order attacks. I probably should have targeted Asajj first, but if you target Asajj first, she just comes back right away because Zombie revives her, and then you have to kill her again, and then Zombie revives her again, and then once again, if you take her out, then Zombie stops. But that's the same thing with Nute. Like, that mechanic is really interesting. You have to take out Nute twice, you have to take out Asajj 3 times, you have to take out Zombie any number of times, and you have to take out Jango multiple times as well. And so this team is really cool. Like, the only one that you don't have to take out a bunch is Dooku, and a lot of times Dooku's going to be hiding behind stealth anyways. And so I don't know, I really kind of admire this team. My opponent had a really cool team here. The other component to this as well was the fact that if Dooku was able to go, he would put everyone into stealth except for Zombie, who is not a Separatist. And so I wouldn't be able to target anyone with anything unless it was an AoE, except for Zombie. I'd just have to kill Zombie while the other team just kind of wailed on me. And so really an impressive squad. I was lucky that I was able to just one-shot Dooku right away, but this squad is something I am really considering running, like this combination. And so, you know, I will absolutely give credit to my opponent. Their defense was really interesting, and I don't know, it's something I'm going to look into. So 55 banners is, you know, maybe kind of expected for Padme, but still not the very best. So I actually ended up dropping 26 banners on offense. Even though I didn't fail any attacks, dropping 26 banners is quite a few and not what I want to do. The good news is that I was able to get the final undersized win on this attack, so I don't have to worry about that feat anymore. That's a lot of points that kind of go into my total, and it's great. I'm really glad that I was able to do that this early on. My opponent waited a really long time to make their attacks. There was less than 2 hours left before they started making their attacks, but I did manage to catch all of their different moves, and so I'll kind of walk you guys through all the different things that happened. First, my opponent took out my Qi'ra Wampa team, which is pretty easy, and my Wat Nute Nest team with Relic 7, which is not easy. And they only lost 5 banners, and so that was not necessarily something that I wanted. My Emperor Palpatine team went down next for 56 banners, which means that they stole 4 banners, and normally that's great, but it was not really the rate that I was hoping for. Next, my Jango team was able to steal another 3 banners, but again, that was not enough. I needed to be stealing 5 or more every attack. Asajj and Nightsisters were able to steal 1 banner is all. My opponent was able to take them out with 59 banners. Not enough. General Grievous got taken down for 59 banners, which is not enough. I needed my opponent to fail on either my clones or my Geonosians. Those are my only 2 teams remaining, and if they were able to full clear me without any fails, I would lose. Luckily for me, my clones held. They finally held. Thank goodness. I was so relieved. And my opponent apparently used Geonosians there and failed against them. And so it was a huge relief. They did manage to take out my Geonosians in 1 hit right after that. And that didn't matter. They had already dropped 20 banners. So I don't know what they used on their second attack, but they ended up killing the clone sergeant and I think Rex, and then eventually they were just able to take out the remainders. But at that point, I had already surpassed my opponent's score, and thank goodness, that was a really close fight. And with that, I was able to win my group, and not only did I win my group, but I advanced to being 9-0, which means that really all I need to do was win 1 more match to be able to get into Qi'ra for a 3rd time, which is an excellent result. Obviously, that's the goal. And it's a great way to send off the 5v5 only format, because CG has said that they're going to add ships and 3v3 in the next Grand Arena, and I assume that we're not going to see another 5v5 completely until maybe never. So hopefully I can make Qi'ra. I don't want to get cocky. I think I have a pretty good chance at least making it to Qi'ra. I want to see how far into Qi'ra I can get, though. If I can get to top 100, top 50, top 20, whatever. At any rate, guys, I think that we're going to wrap this up here. So thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for the final round of Grand Arena Championships for the exciting Qi'ra conclusion. And remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.